Hey everyone, Ashley Mailloux here with the Daily Racing Form. Saturday, March 25th, race of the day is the Grade 3 Desert Stormer, which is a 6-furlong dirt event at Santa Anita Park. It's their 8th race on the card. So for fillies and mares 4 and up, a purse of $100,000, and it is a compact field. We're going to take a look at this field here of 5 runners. Interesting horses to note: Dance to the Music raced in the Desert Stormer last year back in 2022. Stella Noir is a horse that's been on the turf really as of late, and a lot of her starts going to get back on the dirt for the first time since early on in her career. And then Elm Drive is a horse that has actually raced in Grade 1 and Grade 2 competition, and most recently was seen at Pimlico back in September. So it's an interesting race here. Don't forget, you can scan or click your QR code on your mobile device to get Race of the Day past performances for free. It's a great resource. If you're not familiar with our tool, definitely check it out. Now let's go through this field one by one. We'll start with the number 1, Violent Runner, who was able to pick up that 5th lifetime win last time out in a $40,000 claiming event. Was actually picked out of that race for $40,000. So now joins the barn of Steve Knapp, who wins at 17% first off the claim. You kind of look down the page and look at this 5-year-old mare's races. She's interesting. She's been able to win on the front end. She's been able to kind of split a field mid-pack and make a nice late run, and that's what we saw from her last time out. That was going slightly longer. The distance isn't the concern. I think when you look at her races, she has fared well, and I think she's getting a compact field today, which certainly helps her chances because she is going to step up. And her only real try at stakes competitions in the Grade 3 Las Flores, and she didn't fare too well in that race back at the end of 2022. Now we'll move to the number 2, Half Past 12. This is a stablemate of Violent Runner, who disappointed last time out, but that was all the way back in June of 2022. Now, this horse, this filly specifically, has had plenty of time off. We haven't seen her at the races since I mentioned June. Partially, the layoff would be a concern. The barn is not known to have them ready to roll off that long of a layoff at first asking. The big thing is, though, maybe the surface change helps her. Her last several efforts have been on the turf. She is going to get back onto the dirt, where she is 1 for 1 on the Santa Anita main track. And when you go back to that race, it was a very big performance. The Beyer speed figure wasn't the strongest. It was a 62, but she was a 6-length winner. And from there, her connections decided to try her in stakes races and actually move her to the grass. So it'll be interesting. These horses, as you kind of go through the field, they're not the most consistent of types, which actually makes this race really tricky to handicap. The number 3, Dance to the Music, out of the Mark Lapp barn, was recently finished 9th on the turf, and it was her first turf effort, so I'm really willing to draw a line through that race. It was her first start in several months as well, but I just really think, A, she needed the race, and probably B, and more importantly, the turf was not her preferred surface. And I want to take a look at actually her last performance in the Desert Stormer, which was back on June 4th of 2022, and look at her performance in here. She earned an 88 Beyer speed figure for this performance. She's the number 1 on the inside, and she's going to duel it out here in the stretch with Becca Taylor, who was heavily favored in here at 3 to 5. And I understand she kind of gives up the battle here, and Becca Taylor ends up being much the best. But this was a strung out field. It was a compact field once again, but I thought she still kind of held her own in the stretch and was just second best in that day. I mentioned the Beyer speed figure was big, and from there on, they did take her to Del Mar. She didn't really run well over that surface, and maybe she prefers Santa Anita's main track. So I do think she's probably a major player in this race. We'll move to the number 4, Elm Drive. This one was previously trained by Phil D'Amato at one time in her career, and actually is going to rejoin the barn. Over the summer, they took her to both New York and to Maryland for races. She didn't fare too well. And when you go back to her last performance with Phil D'Amato, we're going to take a look at that replay. I thought she was doing okay. This is a Grade 2 race at Los Al. And looking at this, looking at her performance in this race, I think the big thing to note, she's the number 7. She's on the outside. She's battling with a pair to her inside. And at one point, she looks like she's got the job done. But don't forget, Los Al's stretch is very long here. And you can see she's really got to try to sustain her bid. And she's not able to really keep up with the eventual winner in here. And you look at that name, it's Becca Taylor again. And just looking at Becca Taylor, she's been able to beat several runners in here. A pretty nice horse to make note of. And I just thought the curiosity with her is maybe she didn't love Los Al's long stretch. Maybe the configuration at Santa Anita will play better to her strong suits. And when you look at her last appearance at Santa Anita on the main track, it was a winning one. So something also to throw out there as well. Then rounding out the field, the number 5, Stella Noir, out of the Keith DeSormo barn, does have a win locally at Santa Anita on the dirt. You have to go very far down the page to find it. But the other thing I wanted to note with her is looking at her races in her career, she's kind of made that switch to the turf, and she's strictly been a turf horse since the beginning of 2022. And you look at her efforts, she's been trying to close from off the pace. She was able to pick up a win 2 starts back at the beginning of January of this year. And I want to take a look at this replay. I know it's a turf race, and the surface is completely different, but I thought this was a really big performance from her. She hadn't been in the winner's circle in some time. It was almost a year, but it was a confidence boosting effort. And to look at her in the trip that she ends up getting in here, once she's kind of grinding here and really getting called upon. You can see her here, the number 2, but the way she gets it done when she really kind of extends her stride, I thought she looked pretty good in this effort to get the win. And she was a bit of a upset in here at price of about 6-1. So I'm curious to see her back on the dirt. I mentioned she does have a win, and actually she had several dirt races that were quite respectable, and I think the numbers from those races would put her in the mix against this field. So compact field of 5 here. Before we kind of look at my top picks in here, don't forget to check out our YouTube page, Daily Racing Form. Lots of great content on there. But looking at this race, I think it's interesting. The field, a lot of them need to get back to their former ways. They need to try different things, maybe different race strategies. But ultimately, when I got down to it and tried to narrow it down to my picks, I don't think it's really surprising. Looking at the number 4, Elm Street, this is a horse that's had success in Phil D'Amato's barn. At her best, her numbers on the dirt, I think, would certainly put her in the hunt for the win. She's got some really nice buyer speed figures on the main track. And while, we saw the race at Los Al and she wasn't able to kind of really, close late, I think she can kind of sit off the pace in here and maybe can make that late run, especially on Santa Anita's track and that configuration. Then from here, I was torn between the 3, Dance to the Music, and the 5, Stella Noir. I just thought Stella Noir might get a good trip in here, and an interesting note for the barn. They do really well when they move horses from the turf to the dirt. They're 21% from a sample size of 34, so that was a little bit of a factor as well. And then to round it out, the number 3, Dance to the Music, at her best, she could be a factor in here, but I think she left some things to be desired. So hopefully she'll step it up, making her second start of 2023. So for me, Elm Street's my top pick here in the Grade 3 Desert Stormer. Good luck.